Hello, my dears. Welcome to the Spicy Stories channel, where you will find several spicy stories. I want to share with you a story that happened to me. Stay until the end of the video because you will learn everything about my story that I had never told before. But I plucked up the courage, and I want to extend an invitation to you at the end. I am already happy to see you here. So let's go. My name is Emily Johnson. I have been married to Michael for 11 years. We have a charming house in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. Our marriage has always been stable, without major ups or downs, but without major sparks either. Michael is a dedicated accountant, practical and predictable. Qualities that initially attracted me, but that over time became part of the routine that I began to question. Everything changed one sunny morning in June. Our garden was in chaos, and Michael decided to hire a gardener. That's how I met Daniel Miller. He arrived promptly, wearing faded jeans, a white t-shirt, and a blue cap that shaded his light eyes. He had an easy smile and an aura of simplicity that contrasted with the rigidity of my life. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. I'm Daniel. I'll be tending your garden today," he said warmly. "Please call me Emily," I replied, trying to sound casual but feeling a slight heat in my cheeks. He got to work immediately, pruning bushes and pulling weeds with a skill that seemed almost artistic. Meanwhile, I watched him through the kitchen window, making a coffee that I knew he would probably refuse. There was something about the way he moved, the concentration he gave to every detail that captured my attention. The next day, I decided to go out and talk to him. I brought him 2 glasses of ice-cold lemonade. He smiled when he saw me, wiping his hands on a cloth before taking the glass. "Thank you, Emily. This was perfect in this heat." We sat in a nearby shaded area, and the conversation flowed naturally. He told me that he had grown up in a small town in rural Texas, and that after years of working in sweltering offices, he had decided to pursue his passion for gardening. His story fascinated me. He was unlike anyone I had ever met, authentic, spontaneous, and full of life. Gradually, our relationship evolved. Daniel came to the garden 3 times a week, and I found myself looking forward to those days. I began to take better care of myself, wearing dresses that had previously been forgotten in the back of my closet. When Michael asked, I would blame it on the summer or a new attempt to break out of the routine. One particularly hot afternoon, Daniel finished work early. We were sitting on the garden bench when he looked at me in a way that made my heart race. "Emily, are you happy?" he asked, his voice low but full of meaning. The question took me by surprise. It wasn't something Michael or anyone else had asked in years. I hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I don't think I've ever stopped to think about it." Daniel nodded, his eyes fixed on mine. "You deserve to be happy. Everyone does." That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. For the first time, I allowed myself to question my life, my marriage, and my choices. Michael was a good man, but there was a growing distance between us that neither of us seemed to know how to bridge. A week later, Daniel finished trimming the trees and called me over to see the results. When I approached, he held out his hand and said, "Come on, I want to show you something." He led me to a small tree in the corner of the garden where he had planted yellow flowers around it. "This is for you. Yellow symbolizes joy, and I thought you might like it." I couldn't help it. I started to cry. Maybe it was the unexpected gesture, maybe it was the contrast between Daniel's attention and Michael's apathy, or maybe it was something deeper that I didn't yet fully understand. "Emily, I need to tell you something," Daniel said, his voice firm but his eyes full of uncertainty. "I have feelings for you. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." There was a heavy silence between us. My heart was in turmoil, torn between what was right and what my heart desired. Finally, I answered, "Daniel, I have feelings for you too, but I'm married. It's not that simple." He nodded, respecting my answer. But something between us had changed. The tension in the air was undeniable. The next few days were a constant internal struggle. Daniel kept coming to the garden, but we avoided being alone. Each encounter was a mix of desire and guilt, like walking on the edge of a cliff. One night, Michael came home late. He was exhausted and barely said a word to me before he went upstairs to his room. I sat in the living room, staring out at the moonlit garden. I pulled out my phone and texted Daniel, "Can we talk?" Tomorrow, after you're done? He replied a few minutes later, "Sure, I'll be here." The next day, when Daniel finished his work, we sat on the garden bench. I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to say, but I knew I needed clarity. "Daniel, I don't know what to do," I began, my voice shaking. "You brought something into my life that I didn't even know was missing, but I can't just walk away." He took my hand, his eyes meeting mine. "I don't want to complicate your life, Emily, but I also don't want to pretend this isn't happening. Maybe you need to think about what you really want." Those words stayed with me. I began to reflect on my marriage and what it meant to be happy. I realized that for years I had been living on autopilot, fulfilling expectations without questioning my own desires. In the days that followed, I began to notice things I had ignored before. Michael was becoming more and more distant, always caught up in his work and his own thoughts. I tried to start conversations, but the response was always superficial or bored. The space between us felt like an abyss. One cloudy afternoon, Daniel called me again. He had finished planting a small herb garden near the kitchen. When I approached, I noticed that he seemed different, restless. Before I could say anything, he pulled something out of his pocket. A small envelope. "Emily, this is for you. I don't want you to read it now, but when you're alone." I just needed to get my thoughts down on paper. I stood there holding the envelope as he walked away. My heart was pounding. I waited until late at night to open it, when Michael was already asleep. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Emily, from the moment I met you, I felt something different. You are like a light in my life, something I never expected to find. I don't know how to describe what I feel, but I know it's real. I know it's complicated. I know you have a life, but I needed you to know that. No matter what happens, I want you to know that you deserve the best the world has to offer, including happiness." The words were simple, but full of emotion. I spent the whole night awake, holding that letter, my heart torn between two worlds. That morning, I made a decision. I needed to talk to Michael. When he got home that night, I asked if we could sit down. He seemed surprised, but agreed. I started talking about how I felt, the distance between us, the suffocating routine, the lack of connection. "Michael, I have to be honest, I'm not happy. And I don't think you are either," I said, my voice cracking. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Emily, I know. I've been feeling that way too, but I didn't know how to talk about it." The conversation was long and painful. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and what we wanted for the future. We decided that we needed some time to think, to figure out what really mattered to each of us. Over the next few days, I distanced myself from Daniel. He understood and respected my need for space, but there was a look of understanding and sadness in his eyes every time we saw each other. Meanwhile, Michael and I began exploring couples therapy, trying to find a way to reconnect with what we once had. But life is unpredictable. One evening, as I was sitting in the garden, Daniel appeared. He hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to speak. "Emily, I'm leaving. I got a job in another city. Maybe it's what's best for both of us." My heart sank. I wanted to ask him to stay, but I knew that would be selfish. I just nodded, holding back tears. "I wish you all the best, Daniel. You deserve it," I said, my voice low. And with that, he was gone, leaving a void that took a long time to fade. Michael and I continued to work on our marriage, but something inside me had changed forever. Daniel taught me that life is too short to be lived without passion, but also that difficult choices are part of what makes us human. Even with all the uncertainty, I knew that somehow I was on the right path, a path where I was finally able to seek my own happiness. I'm glad you made it this far. Now I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to receive all of our videos. Like, share, and leave in the comments what you thought of my story. I promise I'll read and like your comment. I want to talk to you. I'll stop here and see you in the next video, okay? See you then.